Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Great to be here with you as always. Brand new Cabral Concept. Today we're going to be going over the 3 foods that spike PCOS. If you're not familiar with PCOS, I want to go through that with you here today. So whether it's affecting you or someone you love or your integrative health practitioner, you're looking to help people, your clients all around the world, PCOS is actually quite common. We see at least 1 out of 10 women in our practice, let's say under the age of 40 years old, with this particular condition. It is something that's becoming more and more prevalent in society, mainly because of exaggerated levels, not due to anyone's particular fault, but exaggerated levels of stress and environmental-based toxicities. Now, this could be everything from pesticides, flame retardants, triclosan, like all the things put in makeup, cosmetics, toothpaste, foods, etc. Plus what we have is all the heavy metals in water and in our environment, combined with more stress than ever on a personal, emotional based level. So when you have that, you can see how this would disrupt overall hormones in the body. And whenever we're talking about PCOS, we're mainly talking about testosterone levels being elevated, estrogen levels being more dominant, lower levels of progesterone, higher levels of insulin or blood sugar, and usually lower levels of thyroid. So that's what we see inside of our practice. We see this all the time. You can check for yourself, but I'm going to go through the symptoms first. All right. So these are the symptoms that the majority of women that we see in our practice are dealing with, typically between the ages of around late teens, but really 20 years old or so to about 40 years old. So irregular periods, that's kind of the first sign that there may be an issue, is instead of having, let's just say, a 28-day menstrual-based cycle, the woman's period will become more regular. 32 days, 35 days, some months are maybe 23, some months skip a month. And so this can also lead then to fertility-based issues. So one of the main issues that we have to fix when we're looking at helping women with fertility is actually looking at PCOS-related issues. Now, if you're not familiar with PCOS at all, I totally understand. It stands for polycystic ovary syndrome. And what that means is basically small little fluid-filled sacs or cysts can actually grow on a woman's ovaries. So the interesting thing is, though, many women can have PCOS-based symptoms. It's not as common, but without the cysts themselves. So it does not mean that you can't get all of these symptoms and it shows up on your lab tests without necessarily having to have cysts on the ovaries. So some additional symptoms that women may find is a larger amount of hair growth than normal on their particular body. Now, this could be on arms, legs, but it can also start to grow on their face as well. Acne. So it can be cystic acne, much deeper acne than typical, and not just always on the face. It can be on the upper chest, back, and neck as well. Hair thinning, especially on the crown of the head, so the top of the head. Again, this could be a symptom of low thyroid as well, but certainly it can be an androgen-based issue, which means higher levels of testosterone. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to get to, of course, the 3 foods that can exacerbate this, but we'll talk about that in terms of androgens. A lot of women PCOS deal with weight gain, so stubborn weight gain, and very difficult to lose it oftentimes without fixing those hormones. We already talked about the fertility-based issue, difficulty getting pregnant. And then just a couple lesser known ones would be overall fatigue. Highs and lows in emotions and energy is a hallmark really of PCOS. And the last one would be much less common to associate with PCOS, but sometimes darkened patches on the body. It could be on the elbows, it could be in the folds of the body, so armpits, elbows, sometimes behind the knees as well. And oftentimes in the groin, the inguinal cleft as well. So basically where the hip bones meet your upper legs. All right, so we talked a little bit about which hormones are imbalanced. So what feels like higher levels of estrogen, even if they're not elevated, because progesterone levels are low. So that's considered then estrogen dominance. Then we see higher levels of testosterone for women, typically above a 40. So estrogen might be above a 2, or it might just be normal, somewhere around 0.5 to 1.5. But progesterone, especially during the luteal phase, is well below 150. So that again leads to estrogen dominance. The testosterone can be above a 40, and the TSH, it could be above a 2, but oftentimes it's just low levels of free T3. That That means usable thyroid hormone. Now, in terms of insulin levels are typically above a 6 in the morning, sometimes even above a 10, and we'll oftentimes see that fasting glucose start to creep up well above a 95, and sometimes the hemoglobin A1C on the lab test will look like a 5.5 or higher. So this means that you're in it. Like if you have these lab results, they're all fixable. That's the good news, but you need to get to work. Like that's the whole thing, is like sometimes we can always ask why, and I like to ask why because I like to know the underlying root cause, but no matter what, we need to get to work. And one of the biggest things that we need to do is remove inflammatory trigger-based foods. Now, there's a bunch of foods that everyone has individually. I shouldn't say a bunch, but everybody has like 2 or 3 foods that they're sensitive to. A lot of people say, well, food sensitivity tests don't work. They only show the foods that you're sensitive to. It's simply not true. The food sensitivity test from an IgG perspective looks at foods that you have a delayed response to. And most humans eat like 20 to 30 different types of food or so per week, some more, some less. Some keep it a little bit more bland, some do a little bit more out there, but for the most part, it's not that much. But so if it reacted to the foods that you ate in your diet, of course you would see all 20 to 30 foods react, right? But that's just not the case. So it's just people, who are naysayers always saying the opposite. But a food sensitivity test is a great thing to run. But I want to share with you 3 right now that I can tell you for sure affect most women. And we have a practice that we see hundreds of thousands of people. And so I can share with you just exactly what we see. So the first one is sugar. Now I know sugar itself isn't necessarily a food, but more maybe a food category, right? So all different types of sugar. But really, we're not talking about fruit. We're not talking about berries. We're not talking about, some sweet potatoes. What we're talking about is processed sugar. Now, it can include flours and different things like that. I won't disagree with you. I would recommend removing those at least in the beginning. That's for sure, right? Without a doubt, we do agree with that as well. But sugar, processed sugar, and it doesn't just have to be Skittles, or Twizzlers. It can be anything that is processed down and refined, but sugars for sure would be it. So things like alcohol or alcohol-based mixers. It could be even sugar alcohols. I mean, I don't see that doing well with a lot of people's gut in general, but others would be breads and pastries and muffins and like processed bars. Anything like that is not ideal. And the reason is that it spikes blood sugar. So if it spikes blood sugar, here's what starts to happen. This is why it's really important that we look at the holistic viewpoint of this. That can then begin to spike levels of androgens, and namely testosterone. And so this is one thing that we want all women to have good, healthy levels of testosterone. But when you spike testosterone levels, it can lead to greater levels of PCOS. So hallmarks, again, are elevated levels of insulin, elevated levels of testosterone, and then we typically see estrogen dominance and lower thyroid. Okay, so really important because also the insulin levels can stay elevated, leading then to increased weight gain. So this is a big part, with women that have PCOS, they're more susceptible to weight gain as well. They don't re-regulate their blood sugar levels as well. They don't burn fat as well. And so we need to fix that, right? We need to make that bring it back into balance, which is that homeostasis that we always look for every individual. Because remember, a body at equilibrium or homeostasis is healthy. It's able to regulate blood sugar. It's able to regulate digestion. Or this next one, this is a big food sensitivity for many people. These next two actually. So the first one is gluten. So gluten doesn't affect everybody. I'm not going to say that it does. It can be very inflammatory. So that is a big issue because when you look at gluten, you can actually see that it causes some serious leaky gut in susceptible individuals. And even those that aren't susceptible can have some level of intestinal permeability with multiple gluten servings per day. So we want to be careful with that. I know that a lot of people move more towards a gluten-free bread or sourdough bread, which has little to no gluten. And I think it's a much better choice, without a doubt, because gluten in general is just not the healthiest thing for us to be consuming, at least not in a large amount, that's for sure. All right, but for women with PCOS, very specifically, this can trigger an inflammatory based issue or chronic inflammation if they're consuming it on a daily basis. So even something like sourdough bread, I don't recommend it for any women with PCOS or anyone really with inflammatory based conditions. And that would include autoimmune issues. It's just not something that I'm going to recommend. Let's get better first, right? And then we can start to reintroduce this if we'd like to. If you want to have bread, we look at non-gluten-based varieties, typically a millet bread or a more natural bread like that, but certainly gluten-free is one of the biggest ones. The gluten-based issues can also they can make it more challenging to balance those blood sugar levels and then leading to more weight gain. Because when you look at it, well, what are you eating that's gluten? Okay, so it might be like best case scenario, it's a healthier version of a gluten-free bread. All right, so like you've got that. But still, you're talking about refined flours, which kind of then falls into the sugar-based category. So gluten-free anything tells me for the most part that this is more of a refined-based food. So gluten-free chips or gluten-free baked goods, gluten-free bread, all of those things, we're going to want to eliminate them at least for 12 weeks while trying to rebalance the body with PCOS. All right. The next one, people go back and forth on this, but the truth is that most forms of cow's milk dairy are highly inflammatory. They spike androgen levels in the body, which if you're trying to put on a lot of muscle or you're trying to grow the body, it increases IGF-1. It can increase insulin levels. It can increase anabolism of the body. All right, well, that is absolutely not what women who have PCOS want. So maybe some people, they do want that. I totally get it. It is an anabolic food. If you're looking to put on a lot of muscle, I'm not going to say that drinking milk is not anabolic, because it is, right? So I want to bring you an unbiased perspective. Now, is it best for your digestive system or best for potentially for some people mucus-based production or increasing IGF-1, which again, you want to build muscle, but is that the best for long-term health? You know, that's debatable. And I would likely say no. If you're trying to err on the side of caution, probably not the best thing for you. Now, if you were to look towards more of a goat's-based milk or sheep's-based milk, which the majority of the world always used instead of cow-based, then I would say you're much better off. Now, we can go back and forth between whether it's grass-fed or non-grass-fed. Of course, grass-fed is much better. And then you can look at A1, A2 milks, but that's not the discussion we're having today. If you have PCOS or you have a lot of inflammatory-based issues, we're going to want to eliminate that. You could talk about a very specific raw grass-fed A2-based milk, you know, in the future, like you can chat about that, but not when you're looking to heal this particular type of an issue. Nobody with PCOS needs to drink any type of dairy-based beverage, because most likely they're sensitive to it. With an inflamed gut, again, you can go back and forth with raw milk. Can it have benefits? For some, it may. I would say a raw goat's is going to be much more beneficial than raw cow, but I know it's not as easily accessible. People don't enjoy it as much. Regardless, I wouldn't recommend any dairy for someone with digestive-based issues, because they can always consume it in the future if they want, and they don't need it in order to heal their gut. Let's do tried and true things that we know are going to resolve this issue, bring the body back into balance, and then as it starts to be able to deal with more, and you proved to yourself that dairy is not a sensitivity by running a food sensitivity test, then for sure, you could look into that. So dairy, though, is not just a food sensitivity. It is something that can spike or increase androgen levels, and by that I mean testosterone-based levels. So if you are looking to heal from PCOS, my highest recommendation is to run the Big 5 labs. If you can't run the Big 5 labs, I'd at least run one lab, which is called the Stress, Mood, and Metabolism Test. It looks at your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA. It looks at your estrogen progesterone ratio. It looks at your insulin, hemoglobin A1C, thyroid for TSH, T3, T4, and those are free, by the way, free T3, free T4, TPO antibodies, and it looks at vitamin D as well as cortisol throughout the day. So when you look at that, then you start to understand the entire picture. And then, of course, the Big 5 would include the food sensitivity test, gut testing, heavy metal testing, vitamins and minerals, and then inflammation markers. So run the Big 5 whenever possible. You don't have to run it with our team. You can run it with any integrative health practitioner level 2 in the world. We have no affiliation with them. It's their own business, their own practice, but they're certainly qualified to do that. There are many licensed naturopathic doctors that could help you with this, but just make sure you're working with someone that knows how to help, because PCOS is fixable. Is it fixable overnight? No, we need to do some work. There's no doubt about it, but you can feel like absolutely better in 12 weeks, and then continue to get better every 12-week base cycle. So 3 months feeling so much better, 6 months feeling amazing, and you just continue the cycle as the body continues to get back to a level of homeostasis. So those are my recommendations, and then those 3 foods, we want to eliminate those. Even if you're not doing anything else, it's going to absolutely help with balancing levels of inflammation in the body and trying to balance androgens to a greater degree, that and blood sugar insulin levels. So hopefully this was helpful. We've got lots of shows on female hormones at StephenCabral.com/podcast, a whole category dedicated to it. You can swipe through the images at the top. And for female hormone balancing in general, you can always go to StephenCabral.com/courses. You can take the course on it if you'd like. In general, again, we just want to help. Just let us know how we can help. Leave a comment below. Have an amazing day. All the links and the summary will be at StephenCabral.com/3232. Do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.